Take my lips and speak through them. Take our ears and hear through them. Take our hearts and set them on fire with love for thee. May I speak in the name of the living God. Amen. Amen. I was taught that there is always good news and bad news in a passage. The bad news, according to today's gospel, is that we are stuck with evil for the foreseeable future. The good news is that the problem of evil will be sorted out in the end. The righteous will be rewarded, and the wicked will be thrown into the furnace of fire, and about time too. Although, I guess the really righteous, wouldn't gloat over the wicked finally getting theirs, which makes me wonder, just how many righteous there actually are, which would be whether I am going to get to shine like the sun in the kingdom of my Father, or you, which makes me wonder if the good news about the sorting isn't bad news after all. If you're mixed up, join the club. According to Jesus, the whole world is mixed up. And by way of illustration, he tells this parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field, but while everyone was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. He was talking about the bearded darnel, which farmers dreaded. It's a weed that looks like wheat until it sprouts, when the wheat produces grain and the weed doesn't. But by that time, its roots are everywhere. Do you want us to pull the weeds? Asked the servants. No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. Then the bitter and somewhat poisonous darnel will have to be sorted carefully by hand, bundled and burned, and the wheat gathered into barns. Jesus says privately to the disciples by way of explanation that this is what the world is like. The Son of Man is sowing good seed in God's field while the devil is sowing weeds. And the children of the kingdom and the children of the evil one are growing up entwined together. So much so as to uproot one is to uproot the other. In fact, one could say one is the other, that the two coexist not only beside one another, but also, and more to the point, within one another. That's why all of those efforts to separate ourselves from the wicked world never work. Because the enemy isn't just somewhere outside of us, in someone else. The enemy is in us as well. Remember St. Paul just a couple of weeks ago exclaiming in frustration, I do not understand my own actions. For I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. I find it to be a law that when I want to do what is right, evil lies close at hand. Even when we want to will the good, we can't seem to do it. Our good intentions often have unintended consequences. Hence, the famous expression of the road to you-know-where paved with good intentions. Why? Why isn't God's will done on earth as it is in heaven, as he taught us to pray? Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? He answered, an enemy has done this. Jesus doesn't solve the problem of evil. He doesn't explain it, and he doesn't explain it away. He simply acknowledges the reality. An enemy has done this. Now, we imagine ourselves pretty sophisticated people. We don't talk that much about the enemy, but we're no strangers to the problem of evil. Sin, disease, disasters. Call it the Satan, the adversary, as Jesus does. Call it the absence of the good. Call it the enemy of our human nature. Call it what you will. We live in the world that Jesus is describing, where good grows up next to evil and where evil often appears to flourish. Jesus came among us in love, by love, for love, and we nailed him to a cross. He came healing, making whole, casting out demons, and we rejected him. All is not well with us. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. We live in the agonizing gap between what is possible and what is. Between the world as we can imagine it and the world we're able to build. You and I cannot solve the problem, Jesus is saying. We cannot weed out evil. Let both of them grow up until the harvest, says Jesus. God will sort it out in the end. Hearing this passage at Bible study reminded someone of a funny, not funny story about exactly what Jesus was warning against. She knew an artist who had a studio, and there were these weeds growing up between the building and the sidewalk, and they really bugged him. I gotta get rid of these weeds. He said, I can't stand these weeds. It became really kind of an obsession. These weeds have got to go. I hate these weeds. So one day, in the middle of working with his blowtorch, he became incensed about the weeds, and he marched outside and he blowtorched the weeds growing in the crack between the building and the sidewalk, and he set the building on fire. And he couldn't put it out, and the firefighters had to come, and what happened here? I got obsessed about the weeds. And he was only renting this building. He set his own building on fire, trying to get rid of the weeds. This is the meaning of Jesus's parable in a literally present-day parable. We live in a mixture of good and evil. We are a mixture of good and evil. Judging and uprooting are not our jobs. In fact, when we decide to take matters into our own hands, things have a way of going from bad to worse. I'll do the judging, says Jesus. You do the loving. You do the loving. I'll do the judging. God is not waiting on our memo to find out what's wrong with other people. I know it's hard to believe. Incredibly, God is not looking for our help in setting a blowtorch to the problem of evil, because he thinks we're going to burn the building down, which we apparently literally do. As any organic gardener will tell you, the best way to cut down on weeds is not with an herbicide, but by planting more perennials. And we do well to follow that example. Stop trying to root out bad in yourself, in your family, and in the world. You can't do it. And you'll set fire to your own building in the process. Weeds are part of the bargain, says Jesus. Evil is here. Negativity is here. Cruelty is here. But we do not have to add to it. We can live the lives that Jesus came and lived and died and rose to give us. We can live it. We can live lives of grace and gratitude and glory. But we have to make a decision to do it, because the weeds are going to continue to beset us come what may. Instead of focusing on them, which only steals our joy and our peace and our good attitude, focus on what is right. Focus on the good and how to get more of it. Screaming, "You never listen to me," does not actually make people want to spend more time listening to us. I've tried it. It's not really effective. A better approach is, the other day when we were talking together, I really loved spending time with you like that. How can we have more of that? What do we want more of in our lives? How can we have more of it? Focus on what is right with your marriage, with your children, with your friends, with your boss, with your job, instead of what's wrong with it. It has been wisely said, what you focus on grows. What you think about expands, and what you dwell upon determines your destiny. There is bad news, and there is good news. The bad news is the fire awaits us. The good news is it's the fiery love of God, a love that will consume all the weeds that choke the abundant life and joy that God intends. There may be precious little when God is through. Emphasis on the precious. But on that day, the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen. Amen.